Broadcasting from the crypt. Welcome to Velvet Bite Radio.
You've entered Velvet Bite Radio, my friends, where the undead speak and the forgotten bite back. I'm your host, Melissa Dawn Harris, writer, researcher, and devoted wanderer through vampire folklore, history, and film. Each week, we descend into the crypt of culture to uncover the myths, monsters, and meaning behind the vampire's eternal allure. So pour a glass, dim the lights, and let's begin. All right, everybody, we are live again tonight. Velvet Bite Radio here. I have a wonderful guest in Dennis Carroll, but before I get into talking about that, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the Substack channel. If I get one more Substack subscriber, we can actually stream live there. There is a lot of, you can be a paid subscriber or a free subscriber. There's lots of content for both free and paid, but it is over. I'll give you the address there. It's melissadawnharris.substack.com. Help me out. One more subscriber, and we get to stream live on Substack. I think I'm gonna nix out streaming live on X. It's just a cluster F, you know what. But yeah, and make sure to subscribe and remember, thumbs up. Share this content, and remember to always support my guests. If my guests are talking about something that you are interested in or you like or you find fascinating, go over, subscribe to their podcast platforms, their YouTube platforms, all that stuff, because likely they're going to have some pretty great content. I almost say contract. Content. We got Matthew Lee Ableton in the room, Jonacide Incognito. Welcome to the show. I will be bringing Dennis in just a moment. But yeah, make sure you subscribe. It helps me out. And the more interaction we have in the first few minutes of this live stream, the better the show does. Okay, guys? The better it does. Now, tonight, I've got Dennis Carroll here. He's a renowned vampire hunter, researcher. I believe he's dabbled in the demonology. He's an author. He's gone into deep realms, shadow realms of folklore, history, supernatural. He's got decades of experience and knows a lot of the people in the industry. He also brings a scholarly eye to this field of investigation with the vampire and the folklore. We got, we can do ancient myths, modern encounters. We can go all over the place, cover some demonology stuff. I'm excited. Okay. So I don't want to put this off. Let's bring Dennis in and we'll get started and I'll let him introduce himself. Dennis, how are you?
Good. How are you this evening, Melissa?
I am doing well. Now, for many of the audience, they're probably just streaming in. Some more will come as we go. But what's your story? Like, what is your background? Like, how did you get into this stuff? Why is Dennis Carroll the Midnight Hunter?
Yeah, that's sort of a little title they gives me. I used to start doing a lot of my research around midnight and go on to dawn, so I kind of got stuck with that title. But also, it kind of also connects to my podcast, Hunting the Shadows. So I call it also Hunting the Shadows YouTube podcast channel and agency. I do a lot of paranormal consultations with people. I have talked with people all over the world about different paranormal, supernatural problems that they may have had concerning demonology or whatever the subject might be. And so that's sort of the agency part of it. And so I have been actually investigating actively since I was, I think, about 15 years old. I have been doing this now for well over half of a century, and it never gets old. But I had some experiences when I was younger. As a matter of fact, I lived in a haunted house when I was very young, um, and it was a very interesting experience, definitely. But I also had some of my own paranormal experiences, and I had one basically when I was around 15. I think it was about 15 years old. It sort of lit the fire under me to understand the metaphysical. That's why I became a doctor of metaphysics, to understand the metaphysical parts of this universe, the unseen things that we can't see and
Mhm.
how they interact with us. And it kind of opened my eyes. I actually, during a church service when I was 15, I actually saw three demonic spirits exit a man. And it was a jaw dropping moment for me. And it kind of, up until then, I'd always been interested in supernatural power, and I love ghost stories and stuff like that. I'd always been interested in it. But to actually experience something, it's like that old saying, Melissa,
Real cement.
believing is seeing is believing. It works both ways, definitely. And that's what kind of got me started down the road to that lit the fire that's still burning under me. But I tell people a lot. They say, you do this, you do that, and then I said, well, I didn't just want one slice of the paranormal pie. I wanted the whole pie. So that's why I go into so many different areas with it: UFOlogy, cryptozoology, demonology, ghost research. It's all in some kind of weird way. I'll say this is kind of connected. And somebody asked me the other day, how is it connected? I said, we are the connection. That's how it's connected. We are the connection for it all. Definitely.
Absolutely. I would agree with that, that obviously we're the connection. Do you think that I mean, we'll get into vampires soon because the show's about it, but I'm interested in all these topics. I lived in a haunted house. That's probably why, and was surrounded by folklore from where I was from. But do you think that there's people who have like a theory, like a one theory, like it's all the same thing and we make it manifest a certain way? Whatever the phenomena is, whether it's vampires or ghosts or Bigfoot or do you
Well, a
think
lot
there
of
are
this definitely,
separate things? Like there are separate categories?
a lot of this definitely is manifestation to a certain extent. We have to remember one thing about even dark witchcraft, and I call it dark witchcraft because I have witches get mad at me a lot if I say too much about witches. So I have to, kind of differentiate between the bad witches and the good witches. Okay, but unfortunately, the bad witches get all the publicity. Okay, that's the way that goes. But dark witchcraft is really nothing but a manipulation of reality. And our reality gets manipulated by different things. And the vampire is also part of that manipulation as well. And there's one interesting aspect of the vampire that we'll get into, and that's what I call illusional glamour. The glamour
Oh
that they
yes.
use, yeah, to appear to, to twist your reality and get you to see the way they want you to see them. Is very interesting. They are not. That's part of the shape shifting thing that vampires can
Right.
definitely do.
Well, you know what's weird is I was looking on TikTok. There's that new movie Dracula Love Story, and all these young women are like, "Oh, why can't I have a Dracula? Why does Dracula always have to die?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, you're so easy to manipulate." But it's like they don't get it. They don't get they're actually being manipulated by the character in the movie, which could be
Well,
real.
I think that's part of the vampire's mystique is that little sexuality to them too, as well. It
Mhm.
is almost the vampire feeding is almost a sexual act in
Right.
itself in some ways, and there's
Yeah.
definitely that animal magnetism thing going on there. It's always been there with vampires, especially, like Dracula, of course, and all the other well-known vampires that were like that. But
Right.
I interviewed Dacre Stoker, who is the great grandnephew of Bram
Right?
Stoker,
Of
on
Bram?
my show, and we talked about that, and there is definitely he has that persona about him, although he is sort of. I saw it's sort of like, come here, go away thing with Dracula. Especially with
Yeah.
women with Dracula. Yeah, that's the way it works. But the
Well,
vampire in real life, Melissa, can do that. It can manipulate your reality to get you to see. And we're gonna talk about that tonight because there are just as many different vampires much more than people realize. There are so many different types. But there are supernatural, there are human vampires, there are spiritual vampires, there are energy vampires. The list goes on and on. And but their number one thing that they all have, they are parasitic. They do live off of us in many aspects. And they not only take our energy and our blood, but they sort of live off the essence of our lives as well in that strange kind of way. It's interesting.
So that is interesting. Now, before you see figures in literature that are like
Mhm. Well,
an elite nobleman, like an elite nobleman that's a vampire. The folklore vampire, at least in Eastern European, nobody saw it that way. They saw it as a disgusting corpse. So it's interesting how that changes.
mhm. Well, that's the way it goes with the vampire. They do have an unhealthy kind of lifestyle. I can kind of respect the werewolf a little bit different, because he is sort of based in demonic uh, power and all that, and it's a very dark type of witchcraft. That's what a werewolf basically is, the real true werewolf, the European werewolf. And of course, the
Right.
American werewolf is also called a skinwalker too. They are basically nothing but witches
No.
doing shape shifting stuff. Okay. But now the vampire is sort of somewhat different. He has a sort of a darker supernatural tint to him, whereas the fact is that he is actually, like I said, a parasite. He's living. He needs us. We are like cattle to them in that respect. Um, the werewolf doesn't need us. Okay, he doesn't need us like the vampire does, and I think that's the weakness of the vampire. So he has to kind of compensate for that by doing stuff like the illusional glamour I talked about, and certain other things, the sexual thing, the animal magnetism, and all of it goes on with that. I think he has to utilize that to a certain extent for his own survival and to do what he needs to do because we are paramount to that. We're part of the puzzle for him, a very important part for them.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
there is usually also they depend on some type of human slave in theory. Like they usually have to have humans protect them too. So it kind of
Mhm.
makes them vulnerable.
They're the guardians. Yeah, they are the watchers, as they are called. They are a very distinct servant of the vampire. And I have actually talked with people who have been in the real vampire cults, and they do have guardians like that. They have handlers, as they're called.
Right.
They take care of the vampire when he is not, out doing whatever he has to do, or he is incapacitated to a certain extent. They watch over them and guard them. Vampires have also been known to use animals to do this as well, like hounds or
Hound.
and
Hmm.
different types. So it's almost like the old witches supposedly had familiar spirits. So do vampires, but on a different scale than that. But yeah, definitely that is there. That is part of the vampire thing. And then of course also the vampire has his own circle. Let me put it to you this way. A rogue vampire does not walk the streets looking for victims. That's not a smart thing to do because you leave too many clues behind. You leave too many traces. You leave a trail. The really smart vampires who survive over centuries don't do that. They have their little circle they feed on. They have their.
Right.
It's almost like cattle in a pen to them. They have that
Right.
thing going on as well. So that's part of their survival, that they can do that.
No,
And that's where a very important part with some of these vampire cults and societies come into. If I were a real honest to gosh vampire, Melissa, I would be the head of my own vampire society. That way I could have
right.
all people I wanted to feed off of very safely. I wouldn't have to
Right.
expose myself. And I could still put out the persona, and I have actually seen clues to this in certain areas, especially like New Orleans, where some of these societies may have real true vampires as the head of them, because this is what they are using to sustain and keep their existence going. Smart when you think about it, very smart.
Yeah, and it's interesting though because today uh most people don't believe in vampires. They think it's all folklore and superstition. So Do you think that kind of works in a vampire? If there's a real vampire out there, wouldn't that work in their favor? Because they kind of don't want to be known.
Absolutely. The power of the devil, as it's been said, is that nobody will believe in him. If you don't believe that they're out there, they can operate a whole lot better that way. But they do know that thanks to modern society now and movies and stuff like that, that's already in our consciousness about the
Mm-hmm.
vampire, whether we truly believe they exist or not. There's still something we know about. So they got to be very careful because they're more exposed now than they have ever been before in history, to that extent. So if I were that way, if I were a vampire, I would definitely be very careful about that because the smart. I had somebody tell me this once long ago. The smart vampires are the
Mm-hmm.
older vampires because they know how to survive. The younger rogue vampires don't last that long because they're not
Right.
smart. Yeah.
It's like a gang. I've heard that about Hell's Angels. The younger ones get their ass handed to them sooner because they
Mm.
get arrogant and cocky.
Well,
That's
a lot of these motorcycle gangs are definitely cults to that extent, and some of them are
oh yeah.
involved deep in satanic culteries and stuff like that, and covens and all that. So all of this stuff is kind of a weird network. And think if the vampire's in this network, he's got a lot to work with there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
well, if especially if you're in with a biker network.
Oh yeah, you've got the bikers, you've got the satanic cults, you have the in covens, you have a werewolf covens, you have vampire covens, you have witches covens. The list goes on and on. You have even secret society covens. It is a weird dark network out there, and I think and we've talked about this before, Melissa. This may be where a lot of people who disappear are going because there are definitely a lot of these out there. I'm a former law enforcement officer, and we were actually
Hmm.
sent to a class to learn this stuff. A lot
Really?
about how these cults operate and how these
Right.
societies are embedded in that as well. This is very deep in criminology. We see a lot of ritualistic murders in our time, definitely. So this is something that is real. It's not Hollywood.
Yeah. No, my husband was if he used to be a police officer as well. He was for a while, and I don't know if he's talking about cults, but he's had some really strange experience as a police officer that he was like, "Whoa, there is something weird out there." But
Mhm.
like when you first started looking at the paranormal and demonology, did you start with vampires right away, or did that come eventually because it was just part of the whole fold, or did you always have a fascination with vampires specifically?
Well, actually, when you get into demonology, you will find that the vampire has a very specific role in demonology. He is a spiritual being too. Okay, certain aspects of the vampire are definitely spiritual or demonic.
Hmm.
There are certain demonic spirits that are vampire spirits. I had a very interesting case. I'll relate it to you right quick. Several years ago, I actually had a paranormal group contact me and it said, Dr. Carroll, we know you know a lot about voodoo and stuff, and we have a voodoo case, and we don't, we're not familiar with voodoo and all that. So they turned it over to me, and what the thing was that there was this couple, and they were dog groomers. As a matter of fact, they had two houses. They lived in one house and they worked out of the other house. And Mama Loa moved into their neighborhood, a voodoo priestess, and she came when she moved into the neighborhood. She came to see this woman in the dog grooming business, and she said, "Here, honey, I brought you a vial of Lucky Liquid." And it was a black liquid in this bottle, and she said, "You keep it in your house, have luck, have money come in and all this stuff." And so the woman took it. She didn't want to be, didn't want to be uh,
Rude.
rude and not take it. And so she took the bottle. She said, "I wish I hadn't because that's where my trouble started." And I said, "Well, let me see this bottle." She said, "Oh, well, I threw it away." I said, "Oh, I wish you hadn't done that." because that sounds like very much like a voodoo fetish type thing. And what that is a spell, basically, if you want to put it in layman's terms, is a voodoo spell type thing. And I said, and here's what the problem was: they were having all kind of paranormal activity, the regular stuff, doors and opening lights and all that. But the woman had a very distinct problem. She told me this. She said, Dr. Carroll, I used to could do 10 dogs a day, in the grooming thing. Said now I'm lucky if I do one or two. She said I just have no energy left. I have, there's nothing wrong with me. I've gone to two doctors and they can't find anything. I'm not anemic. They don't know what's wrong with me. They can't, figure it out. She said, but it didn't start to that. I took that vial of liquid, and when I heard that, I said, it was a light bulb moment. Oh, well, what has happened is that this woman has put a voodoo curse on you of a vampire spirit.
And so they're
And
draining the energy.
yeah, it's living off the essence of your very soul. That's what it's doing. If it keeps going on, it's going to suck the life out of you. So I said, I'm gonna have to take care of this. I could do a lot better job if I had that vial, but that's okay. You didn't do that, but I went ahead and set it up to do what we call a house cleansing, spiritual cleansing in that area. And they had a basement. It was sort of a partially open like basement. It was a big house, Victorian style looking house. And I started, me and a guy that was with me, he was my assistant. We started down the stairs into this basement. And honest to gosh, Melissa, before I could start throwing the holy water out, before I could even begin, this spirit rushed past us. It liked to knock me down. I didn't see it. I could feel it pass like a wind passing me. The guy that was with me, he saw a shadow like, and all of a sudden, this thing went up the stairs past us, and all of a sudden, it was a loud bang, big noise upstairs, and I knew then that spirit, before I could even start, had exited that house. Which is good, it's a good thing that happened because that took care of the problem. But I went back. Went ahead and did what I did. Be on the safe side. You always do the cleansing this right, and I've done thousands of those in different places. But I went back up and talked to them, and they said, "What was that noise? Did you knock something over in the basement?" I said, "No, it sounded like it came from up here." I said, and they said, "Well, why? What was that?" I said, "Well, that's the way these dark spirits exit sometimes. They always exit sometimes in a big way. They'll make a noise, they'll knock something over, they'll do something like that on the way out. That's just the way. And vampire spirits are very, very known for that, doing that kind of stuff."
So
And
I was just gonna ask, when that witch does that curse file, does that give her energy too, or does it like what's her? Well, why would a witch do that? Does it feed her too?
well, that's sort of like an active, what we call an active curse, a spell. It has the properties to harm you. And some people just do this as a hobby, Melissa. I mean, this is something the fun thing they do to get their jollies. They think they can, especially someone.
It
And
gives them power.
This Mama Loa, I think, took a disliking to this woman. She just
Oh,
didn't like her and wanted to do this. But anyway, it was right after this incident. The Mama Loa had moved out of the neighborhood before I got there. Okay, we went next
right.
door to a house. The house that they vacated had all kind of markings in it. You could tell it was, and there were chicken bones hanging on the porch, the whole works. And anyway, um, I got a call about a week later, and the lady said, "I'm doing 10 dogs a day now. Everything's good. I'm feeling 100%
Oh,
better." You
oh, I'm
know,
so glad.
and I said, "Well, good. That's what I want. That's what I like to hear. Definitely, we
Well,
succeeded in getting rid of that."
I I had a guy who was running a cult online, and I did a show on him. I didn't list him by name. I called him the
Mhm.
zombie witch doctor, and he started getting these people to do a curse on me, and I'm not sure if it worked. That it was a tumultuous time. I'm not sure it was him, But I've had that where people were trying to do a curse on me because I covered their abusive behavior on a podcast. I was like, "Oh, you can't curse me. I'm protected. Screw you." It was crazy. It was nuts. I have the screenshots
Whatever.
of him calling out for people to do a ritual against me. It was nuts. It was crazy.
I've had
Hmm.
death curses put on me before. I've had several death curses put on me. I had a dark witch one time, a black warlock, blow goofer dust in my face, said, "I'll curse you. You got 3 days left." You know. So I kind of laughed at him. I said, "Yeah, you would like that, wouldn't you? But I'm not going to believe your curse." Power. That's the power of the curses. They first let you know that they did that because they want it to start working on you psychologically, and that
Hmm.
empowers that curse. That's part of the power pack for it. So once you break that, then it has no power over you to that extent. You know.
Hmm. What about the vial thing? Like they didn't present it as a curse, but it worked. Was it just because of that liquid stuff in there did something?
Well,
Or was
yeah,
it subconscious?
probably was something along the terms of like the goofer dust I mentioned, but a liquid form
Mhm.
of it. It can be sort of a witch's brew type thing, or whatever name you want to give it. It's usually got poisons in it. It would be a good idea not to handle anything like that.
Right.
That's like the very famous wolfsbane you hear about, and I do have some wolfsbane
Mhm.
here. It's very, very poisonous. You would not want it around your children or animals, folks. Don't ever have wolfbane, around your house. But these plants that are used in witchcraft, whatever kind of witchcraft it may be, whether it's voodoo or whatever, most of them are poisonous stuff that they use because this is the dark witchcraft. It's not about healing people or
Mhm.
doing this stuff. It's the opposite. It's about death and decay and destruction. That's what it's all about. But it could have been different things in there, and it also and I warn people about this, Melissa, and
Mhm.
be very careful what food you take from people because witches are known to use menstrual blood. They are known to do these things and make these little liquid concoctions for the spells and put it in
Mhm.
food. Let me put it to you this way: what happened with that woman was she took that spell, unknowingly took it. If somebody gives you something, that's why your mother and all your people used to warn you don't take gifts from strangers. Okay, once you take something, whatever it may be, a spell, curse, hex, whatever it is, it's yours. Once you take it, once you
Right.
accept it, and that's what these people try to do. They want you to accept that. That's the number one. So it sort of becomes you own it then. And the only way you can get rid of it, there are different ways to break it. But one of the ways is to pass it on, which is not a good thing. I would not advise you doing that to anybody.
Right,
But
it's like those chain
you get rid
letters.
of it. Yeah, that's you pass it on to somebody else.
Like, and you did blessings to heal that or whatnot. Is there other ways that you would get, because we're talking about a spiritual vampire here. Is there other ways that people, say somebody didn't know anybody, is there a way if they feel like they're feeling sick all of a sudden or tired, is there anything that they can do to like close it up or get rid of it at home?
Yeah, well, here I live in the state of South Carolina. We have a very interesting cryptid called the boo hag. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the boo hag is
Mm.
very vampiric like. The boo hag is sort of like the old hag syndrome thing that rides you, but it will also suck the life out of you. Every breath you take is shorter than one before it until eventually it sucks the life completely out of you. This is a vampire thing, definitely, without a doubt. And the other thing about the boo hag is that once it kills you, it will steal your skin and appear as you the next day to unknowingly to your neighbors or whatever until it finds the next victim to do what it's going to do. And
Right.
I was talking to somebody about this the other day. We were talking about cats being sort of mysterious,
Like a
mystical
guardian.
animals. And there used to be an old superstition that a cat will suck a baby's breath out of it, which is really not true. It's an old superstition, but I can see how that got started because a cat would get on a baby's chest, smell the milk, around it, maybe, and lick its face or something. But also, that weight on the child's chest would keep it from breathing normally and might suffocate it. To a certain, you never know. I mean, that could be how that superstition got started. But it was sort of like cat vampires. They were like sucking the breath out of, babies. Supposedly, that's what people believed. Um, but that is sort of what the vampire spirit will do to you. It will suck the life out of the very essence of your soul out of you. I mentioned this to people a lot. Well, you need to be very careful about who you let touch you and who you touch, because there are energy vampires out there. People that will either take your energy or pass bad energy onto you. And
Right.
we all have, and we're built this way. Even animals have sort of that, you know, um, personal space about them. And we all have
Yeah.
personal space, and we got kind of, freaky feeling if somebody invades our personal space.
Yeah.
And well, there's a reason for that. That's sort of like a bumper, a spiritual bumper around you. A hedge
Right.
is a protective thing. And if somebody gets in that, especially somebody with bad intentions or somebody with bad powers of some sort, your I call it, your spiritual barometer is going to go off. You're going to feel something. Hey, pay attention to that, because something is trying to tell you something. And some people would call it intuition or whatever. Definitely, you've got something going on, and you got to be very. I had a woman not long ago said that she had an incident where another woman touched her, and this woman was a vampire, energy vampire type, and said that she started having bad nightmares after this, and all kind. And this woman would be in her nightmares. Uh, and there are certain witches that can appear in your dream, witches that can actually
Right.
invade, attack you in your dreams as well. And vampires supposedly can do that also.
You hear that in the folklore. Like they get almost like an old hag experience. They have this relative that just died come on their chest and drain all their energy, and they go out because they think it's a vampire, but it's coming in their dreams and everything, and they're exhausted the next morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had a lot of people in the list over the years talk about astral projection, which is another thing that witches can do, and vampires supposedly as well. In the old Hollywood movies, the vampires turn into a mist and a fog, and they go under the door and all that stuff. That is sort of Hollywood's version of these things taking upon their
Right.
spiritual form of
Right.
energy that they can do as well. Um, that's the interesting thing about the vampire. It is a predator, an apex predator when it comes to that kind of stuff. And definitely, it will not only take your life, but of course, some of them live on blood. That's another part of it. We like to call it the red gravy. They love
Red
they
gravy, that's good.
actually, blood to a certain extent is a vampire narcotic for them. The younger the blood, the better, and the more infused it is with fear. Oh, they love that. That is the champagne of blood that they seek after. These things have a definite connection for them. Any kind of energy, though, any kind of energy can run these things. They are living off of that, especially the demonic type of entities that are vampires. They have to exist on that. We call it the loose, the
Deluge, yeah.
negativity. Yeah, the negativity is there, and the demons feed off of that. Demons generate negativity, so that it's sort of like a weird spiritual perpetual motion machine thing going on. They can generate that negativity and live off of it, and exist on it and keep generating it more and more and more until they actually use you up. This is what the vampire does too. Eventually, if he doesn't move on to someone else, he will use you up and discard you.
Right. Just like a
Mhm.
psychopath narcissist in real life. When the well's empty, they got to get new resources.
Absolutely, and that's what I mentioned about what Charles Manson said. When they took him to prison, you may lock my body up for the rest of my life, but my spirit will walk your streets every night.
Mhm.
That was definitely a demonic spirit speaking out of him. If anybody was possessed, he definitely definitely was.
He was a
But
candidate.
that's the way they operate. They're out there looking, they're prowling, looking for, as I think the good book says, beware of the Satan, your adversary, if he goes about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Vampires fit that bill perfectly. Yeah.
Is there a perfect victim? Like, there are other characteristics that people that they prefer have? Like, whether it's psychic or not? Is there like a person that's like a type of preference of psychology or like mindset?
Well, some people, unfortunately, Melissa, are victims looking for a place to hide. That's just the way that goes, unfortunately. I've talked to people about that before, like if you're in a parking lot or something, you walk through that parking lot like a victim, holding your bag, scared and shaking. They're going to
Mhm.
zero in on you. Definitely, the predators will. But if you walk through there making eye contact, saying, you don't want to mess with me kind of look about you, they're going to leave you alone. Well, the same thing goes with vampires. Like I said, they are apex predators, like the werewolf is too. But they operate on that level, looking for someone who will invite them in, someone they can control, someone they can touch and do the things they need to do. That's who they're looking for, someone that will open the door to them. All demonic spirits are this way, and definitely the vampire is no exception.
Yeah, because I remember I had this friend and we would do all this we go on trains, we do a lot of things together, and every time we were on the train, some crazy culty weird person would come up and they would never touch me. They would never. They'd go right for her every time. And one time I looked at her, I said, and they were creepy and some of them were culty looking and weird. And I'm like, "Do you have a sign on you that says kick me?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "We have been on a train like every single time I'm with you and we're traveling and we're going places. They always come after you. They never mess with me. Why is that?" And she was like, "I don't know." She didn't know. She was totally unself-aware. And I'm like, "I'm telling you, you got something. You got a sign, a psychic sign that says kick me on you." And it's true. There's some people, they just, it's in their energy. I don't know how else to explain it.
Well, have you ever known someone that was sort of touchy feely? They're always putting their hands on you, maybe rubbing your arm or touching you. Those kind of people, I think, are the perfect victims for vampires too. They're opening themselves up, unfortunately.
Yep.
Instead of the person that says, don't mess with me, don't get so close to me, don't, they're got a more protective stance, and the vampire doesn't like that. He wants someone that's a little more open to him, and that's where that I think that sexual glamour thing comes in. They use that as a tool, not just to
Right.
twist your reality of the way they want you to see, but also to
Disarm
get you
you.
into power and their control that way. But
Mhm.
that's another aspect of the vampire. He seeks power over his victim.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because it gives him power. And we have a request. We got a
Mhm.
request from Michigan Rob. He wants to know if you've told the vampire New Orleans story, and I don't think you have. What is the story of the vampire in New Orleans?
Well, a matter of fact, I was told the other day that there is a special nightclub in New Orleans called the After Midnight Club, and you can't usually find it. It's not on the open street, but it's down an alley or something. And they say don't ever go to the After Midnight Club because most people who go there never are seen again. And they say it is a club run exclusively by very dark vampires, and they will offer you a drink in this club called the Second Death. And whatever you do, don't drink that. Because it's supposed to be not just some kind of narcotic type thing. It's like a roofery type thing or whatever, but it also has supposed real vampire blood in it, and you will never supposedly be seen again. So there's supposed to be places like that in New Orleans, where I would definitely caution people to be very careful because this is a city definitely that would be the ideal place for a vampire to live. If I were a vampire, I would live there. Okay. That would be where I would go because it's kind of open to the vampire, and nobody would
Mhm.
look at you twice there, in that respect.
Right.
But all big cities are that way, though. They all have their vampire cults and societies, and like I said, some of these are just kids, goth kids looking for something to do, drawn to that lifestyle. But some of them are very serious and very dangerous cults and organizations there. And like I said earlier, some of them definitely have true, real vampires interested in their disposition, you might say, in that. But New Orleans definitely would be an open city for that. I had a very strange incident many years ago that happened in the city of Charleston, South Carolina. I was there. I've investigated a
I've
lot
been
of
there.
stuff, in my time. It's a very haunted city. And I was there one day, actually. It was late on a fall autumn day, and maybe an hour before sundown. And I was looking around one of the very famous old graveyards there in the city. And what I was doing, actually, I was looking for the one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and he was supposed to be buried there. And I was looking around. I was always a big history buff on stuff like that, so I was looking
Mhm.
around for that. And it was, like I said, it was sort of a cloudy day. It wasn't a real bright sunny day. It was late in the day, and I hear a voice behind me. She says, "Do you like cemeteries?" You know. And I turn around, and there's this very pretty girl standing there, and she is very pale looking, and she has long dark hair, and she's dressed. She's thin, very thin, and she's dressed sort of modern and kind of old fashioned. The way I said, she's sort of got a bodice on, like an old fashioned bodice, like, but she's got a newer looking dress. And I said, "Oh yeah, I love cemeteries. They're like a history page out of a history book or something." And she was very friendly, and she stuck out her hand. She said, "He told me her name," and I shook her hand. And all of a sudden, I get a weird kind of a feeling. It was like shaking hands with a dead person. Her hands were so cold, and like I said, this was autumn day. It was warm. It was sunny. We're in the South here, and it was sunny, and it was. There was no reason for her hand to be that cold. I've run into people that may have a circulation problem, but this was something beyond that
This is
because
like
I've had
clammy, dead cold.
I've had
Yeah.
occasion to deal with a lot of dead bodies, okay, in my time. And definitely this did not feel right. And there was that look about her. There was just something not right. That's what it struck me as. And I didn't think of her being a vampire or anything at the time. I wasn't thinking
Mhm.
about that. But she was very friendly, and I shook her hand. And she said, "Oh, I love cemeteries too." She said, "I live here." And I said, "Oh, is that right? You spend a lot of time here." She said, "No, I live here. I'm buried here." And I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm a vampire. Uh, and I'm buried. I'm a real vampire." I said, "Oh, you're in one of these societies or something?"
Yeah.
And he said, "No, I'm a real vampire. I'm 175 some odd years old or something like that." She told me, and she said, "I'm a real thing." I said, "Well, what are you doing out in daytime?" I said,
Right.
Vampires supposed to come out. She said, "Oh, we can come out and we can walk in the daytime, but on a very cloudy, day, dark day, we can come out. Well, we don't like to come out in daytime. Our power is much, much more easy
Limited.
to use at night." That's what she
Right.
said.
Right.
And I said, "That's very interesting. I'm beginning to wonder maybe I should distance myself from this person." This
Grab a
strange,
crucifix,
and
maybe.
yeah, Uh, and so I said, "Well, that's very interesting. I know I thought you might be in, one of these societies and all that." And she said, "Oh, that's just a game some people play." She said, "That's not the real thing. I'm the real thing." And I said, "Well, that's very interesting." So I kind of turn around, I kind of look down at a tombstone or something, and I turn back up to say something to her, and she's gone. I mean, completely gone. And there's
No
no way
explanation.
in that cemetery, Melissa, she could have got away from me, because I could see through it, and there were like a group of people, I think, further on that were leaving out of the cemetery. There was nobody else there, and I started looking for her behind. Did she, get behind a tombstone or something? I look
Yeah.
around where she is completely gone. You know, and so while I'm standing there looking, thinking, what the heck has just happened here? I catch a movement, and off in these big trees flying off is the biggest bat I have ever seen in my life. And we
No
don't have that
way.
big in size. I mean,
That's
it was almost
crazy.
the size of an eagle bat. Okay, it was flying off down through there, and I'm sitting there looking at this. I God, nobody's ever gonna believe this. This is weird. But I told somebody about that. It was a very strange incident, and I had dreams after that night. She would be in my dreams. I would actually see her
She's kinda
walking through the
haunting
cemetery in
you.
my dreams. And she said something very interesting in the last dream I had about her. She said, "We will meet again one day."
Oh, no, is there any other do you know, like, is anybody in South Carolina said something similar, like they've seen a vampire figure in that graveyard, or do you know of any other experiences?
Well, I looked around. I went back the next day to the cemetery, and I looked around. I actually found a tombstone with her name on it, and it was around like 180 something years ago.
Wow, and Charleston, for anybody who doesn't know, it's for America, it's an extremely old city, like, it's named after King Charles II, that's 1670s, like, it's old for America.
Matter of fact, Edgar Allan Poe, that was one of his favorite cities. He was bivouacked there when he was in the army, as a matter of fact, and they think that may be where his inspiration for Annabelle Lee was when he wrote the poem.
Oh.
Yeah,
It's
I've
a
often
beautiful city. It's a beautiful city. I recommend people to check it out.
I've often wondered if he met somebody like I did. That was the inspiration for Annabelle Lee. But anyway, it was really freaky. But I feel like, and somebody asked me about that the other day, and I've told this story on a lot of different podcasts of what that happened. And I said, I have a feeling I will meet her again one day. And when I do, she will probably look the same. Absolutely.
Yes. Now, do you actually go out? Do you get called on investigations like to do demon like is or do you just research it or do you go out to actual vampire infestations and kind of demonology investigations? And
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had several different cases. There are certain cases where supposedly demonic vampire spirits can also inhabit dead bodies. We call this demonic reanimation of the dead.
Mhm.
This can take place supposedly by people performing dark acts of necromancy and stuff like that. This is very dark, deep, dark, evil stuff here, folks. Definitely. And this necromancy can do this kind of stuff and connect it with these demonic spirits. The real true vampire, Melissa, is not what you see in Hollywood depicted in movies like that. It's not like if you were to become a vampire and they were to
Mhm.
call me in to find out about you, you would no longer be really Melissa. You would be some kind of a vampire spirit in your body. If
Right.
you
So it's like that kind of zombie witch doctor where you're kind of possessed by something rather and it's
you're
not you.
being
Your soul's
inhabited,
gone.
your body is being inhabited by that, and it may take on your personality. It may try to fool people into thinking that you're, Melissa. That's the way these things work. Matter of fact, I had a story where somebody told me it was back in when Katrina hit New Orleans.
Mhm.
That there was teams of people that would go out looking in the houses for dead bodies. The people that were that died during the hurricane, and they had actually gone to one house that I think was in the Voodoo Quarter, like of New Orleans,
Mhm.
and they were looking through this house, and what they would do. If they found one or two bodies, they would spray paint outside, one, two, or whatever, how many bodies were in that house, supposedly, if they found them. And they said they found in the back room of this house a body chained to a wall. And the way they talked about it, they could tell it had been used in some kind of a ritualistic type way. And it was very much decayed. I mean, it was not habitable, put it that way, the way it looked. I mean, it was
Mhm.
not viable that it could do anything, and it was very decayed. And they said that while they were looking at it, talking about we need to, spray paint one on this house or whatever, the thing lifted its head up and laughed at them. And they said they immediately got out of that house as quick as they could get out. And they wrote one on the
Mhm.
outside and said, "That's going to be somebody else's problem. We're not going to make it in that house." And left it. And supposedly, when I heard that, I said, "That's what demonic reanimation of the dead sounds like." These demonic spirits can actually reanimate a body that way, and sometimes. Now, the zombie, the real true zombie like that, not the one you see in Hollywood. They don't go around
The
eating people.
voodoo
Real,
hoodoo
real
one.
zombies, real zombies do not devour people. Okay, those are ghouls. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but according to folklore, uh, the zombie is still that person. Okay, if I were to turn you
Right.
into a zombie, you're still Melissa, but you're just under my complete control. You're like an
Yes.
automaton. Yeah, I can get you. And what they would do with these real zombies, and zombies are real, folks. I mean, they really do
Mhm.
exist. They were not really dead people. Okay, what the voodoo
Right.
doctors would do is administer a drug that made you look like you died. Your heart rate was slow.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they didn't have real medical doctors to come in and check you out. But they
Right.
would bury you. They would think you were dead. They would bury you, and the witch doctor would come back later that night and dig you up, administer more medicine to you, and bring you back to a certain state where he could still control you and put you to work in the sugarcane field. That was free labor. And here's the
You know,
interesting thing. The interesting thing. You still got to eat food. You still got to drink water. You are a living person, but you're just in a
right.
zombie state. They would have to be very careful not to let you ever have not one grain of salt in your food, because that salt
Oh.
was the antidote to the zombie fluid. Okay, and
Interesting,
so
because salt
there's a
salt does appear in the folklore.
yeah, and here's
Now
the story
that
about that. Here's the story about
okay.
that. This one woman one day got a knock on the door, and she went to the door. This was in Haiti, I think. She went to the door, and there was her brother. She passed out because her brother was buried like 5 years before. He died and was buried, and there was her brother standing in front of her. That's why she passed out. So when her brother finally got her to, he told her story. He said, I came to myself in the village 50 miles away. I came to myself, and I didn't know where I was at or what was going on. And what happened was somebody actually served him accidentally some food with salt in it. And that broke that zombie formula
Right.
out of the system. And when he did, he came to himself and realized, he was, alive and everything. I mean, he was, a viable person. And they've come to find out through an investigation that this witch doctor had done this to him and made a slave out of him. He worked 5 years out in those sugarcane fields as a zombie. And while everybody else thought he was dead in the ground, in the graveyard.
Yeah, well, no one would be looking for him. And there is a movie
Hmm.
that depicts this type of zombie. It's called White Zombie with Bela Lugosi. And he
Hmm.
plays like this kind of witch doctor. You guys should check it out. It's pretty good. It does that. It's total not your Dawn of the Dead zombie. It's traditional hoodoo, voodoo,
Hmm.
exactly like how you explained it. It's creepy.
When they have analyzed this stuff, some of it comes from a puffer fish, a blowfish, but they have analyzed that stuff and said yes, it has definitely psychotronic products to
Yeah,
it, abilities that it would do these things. It would turn you into a virtual slave, absolutely, and you wouldn't even be able to talk that much. You just do whatever you're told. They give you a machete until you go cut the sugar cane or whatever you do, and but this was free labor. You didn't have to pay them. See, I mean, that was smart on their part of the witch doctor to do, but not good for you as a zombie.
that is
But that's
crazy.
the real zombie. Now, according to voodoo legends, though, that real zombies can be brought back from the dead, supposedly. But they are also reanimated bodies. Reanimated by. I have actually seen voodoo ceremonies, Melissa, and I have watched them. I mean, not tourist things. I'm talking about the real thing. It could have
Right.
cost my life if they had discovered me being there. Um, but I have seen them, and they allow these spirits inside of them. That's part of the voodoo ceremony. They allow themselves to be possessed by these dark spirits that they worship, to the point where I've seen them dance till they fall down and keep jerking. They can't even stand up anymore. These spirits, they call it being ridden by the spirits. You have one foot in this world and the other foot in the spirit world, and that's the way these zombie and voodoo ceremonies
That
go.
that sounds horrible. That sounds worse than death.
It is to a certain extent. It definitely would be, and especially if like you said, everybody thinks you're in the ground, buried, and you're gone, but yet you're still in that state. That's really worse than being a reanimated corpse, in some ways.
Mhm.
To do
Um,
somebody's life that
our
way, not good.
our audience member Jonaside bring up the book, and it's also a movie, Serpent in the Rainbow. He says it's a true
Yeah.
story, and I found that really disturbing. That movie, I was like, oh. So that's one to check out if you're interested in that kind of folklore and myth. I wanted to get into a little like governmental stuff because before we came on, we were kind of talking about these cults and Manson and the vampire cults and that they could go all the way up into different factors. Do you think there's any kind of vampire cults or vampire entities or anything in the government or influencing major positions? Have you ever looked into that kind of element?
Absolutely. The government weaponizes everything. Okay, whatever it may be. They weaponize dolphins. They weaponize fruit flies. The list goes on and on. And definitely, if there are, and I was approached many years ago by the CIA, and they asked me a certain amount of demonic questions about demonology, which really concerned me. Why do they need to know about demons unless
So
they
wait a minute, wait a minute. The CIA approached
bad?
you for you were actually contacted by the CIA for demonology.
Yeah, he actually contacted, wanted to ask me some questions about demonology, and so that like I said, that concerned me. Why do you need to know about demons? I asked him that. He said, "Well, we just certain information we need to access." And but it made me believe that probably they've done something to maybe open portals or doorways to the demonic and allowed maybe some type of demonic things to come through. For all we know, it wouldn't surprise me a bit. But then he said at the end of the interview, he offered me a job with him, and he said, we like people with talent, especially in supernatural stuff and all that. And I'm thinking, yeah, who have you recruited? Definitely, I turned him down. No thanks, because usually the only way out of the CIA is through the morgue. But I told him, I thought about that later. Do you have like on your payroll witches or and warlocks? Do you have werewolves and vampires that work for you? Would not surprise me a bit. Matter of fact, I'd be surprised if they didn't have them.
Mm-hmm. Well, we did a show on it on Tuesday night, everyone. You can check it out. It's on the channel. And they most certainly under MK Often, Project MK Often, which was under MK Ultra, they were contacting Satanists, witches, astrologists, paranormal investigators, all sorts of people to recruit them. And some say they patterned a lot of rituals and stole from Aleister Crowley's rituals as a template, not only to use it as a weapon against the population, but because they thought there was some kind of demon or something they could summon for power.
Absolutely. In certain aspects of dark witchcraft, you can become, there are different, I call it the nine gates of dark witchcraft. There are different powers that you can obtain. You can obtain the power of invisibility. You can obtain the power of levitation, flying. You can obtain the power to portal. That's to, portalize yourself from one place to another. You can also gain the ability to shapeshift. And when you get the ability to shapeshift, you can turn into most anything you want. You can turn into a wolf. You can turn into a werewolf. You can turn into a vampire if you want to be a vampire. That is one way to become a vampire, and that is to be a dark witch. But there are certain rituals and certain horrific things you must do to acquire this power. One of them is you got to murder your child or your sibling as an offering to the darkness to acquire a lot of this stuff. But it is very bad. This stuff is real. I mean, I've seen a lot of this, and I know without a doubt it does exist. That werewolves are real, folks. They do exist. They're just not what Hollywood depicts them, but they are definitely talked about in our folklore. I'm a big fan of folklore. I'm a matter of fact, I'm a member of the American Folklore Society, and
Mhm.
folklore gives us a lot of the clues and a lot of the pointers to these things that we need to know. And also, the vampire is very real, whether it be a spiritual vampire or human vampire. And some of them are just more dangerous than the spiritual vampires in some ways. Uh,
Right.
and here's the bad thing about the werewolf, who is also an apex killer. I mean, the thing about the werewolf is it is a directly plugged into extreme demonic power. It is a horrific beast that will, and if it gets your smell, and I mean that literally, it will not stop until it finds you and kills you and destroys you. This is the way
Mhm.
the werewolf works. And here's what I told somebody the other day: we don't have a lot of werewolf sightings on record. I'll tell you why. Because nobody usually ever lives to give them. The
Right.
werewolf
They're
doesn't.
done.
The werewolf won't cut you a break. No, he will definitely get you, and he will tear you into pieces and then probably eat you. That's just the way he works. This is very horrific demonic power of extreme darkness. But now some people have the curse of the werewolf, which is a different thing altogether. So you've got different kinds of werewolves out there, just like you have different kinds
Mhm.
of vampires.
Mhm. We
Yeah.
have a question from the audience. Renee would like to know what you have your degree in.
Oh well, I'm actually I have a doctorate in metaphysics. I have a doctorate in philosophy, theology, and divinity. I sort of have that in common with my one of my favorite characters, Doctor Van Helsing.
Yes.
Yeah,
You are. You're like Van Helsing. I was going to say that.
yeah. So I've always thought we had that in common with each other. But definitely, I like metaphysics because it is the study of how these supernatural. I'm a supernaturalist. I believe in the supernatural without a doubt because I have seen it with my own eyes. I have experienced. I have seen it in many types of exorcisms. I have seen. I've seen skinwalkers. I know they exist. That they're out there.
Mhm.
I have seen what wishes can do. I have seen full-bodied apparitions. I know that there are such things as that. I've seen demons face to face. All this is real stuff. To me, you know, the jury is not out on this. I know without a doubt that they exist. And that was the very first question that still haunts me to this day. When I first encountered my first supernatural entity, the question that haunts me and will forever haunt me: if this is real, then what else is out there?
Yeah. What
I found
else
that
is?
a lot of a lot of it is out there. It's definitely real.
Yeah, it's interesting because, well, and there's this idea that we only can see so much in the spectrum of light, and that if we could see outside of that, we might be shocked. RS Harmful is asking, are dogmen sightings werewolf sightings, or is dogman something different than a werewolf?
Yeah, the dog man, he's dog man 24/7. The werewolf might be your next door neighbor, your Sunday school teacher. And here's the thing about the werewolf: he does run on lunar cycles, but he doesn't have to have that to change. He can change in broad daylight if he wanted to. The true werewolf can do that, and it doesn't look like Lon Chaney Jr. Okay, that's the Wolfman type. The real werewolf
Mhm.
looks like a horrific, monstrous looking wolf that walks on two legs, and it can run on four legs just as well as it does on two. That's what it looks like. But now, Dogman, most of the time, and what I've learned about him, I've actually may have seen him too. Um, I've actually seen Sasquatch face to face. I know it exists as well. Um, but the dog man, he will probably cut you a break. You know, you probably will walk away from that. A werewolf, you will not. You'll be
Mhm.
incredibly lucky if you live through a werewolf sighting.
Yeah. We have Matthew wrote a poem about South Carolina just now. He's an author and poem,
I
and
like that.
he
That was
is a musician.
that's really good. I
Yes.
like that. That's neat.
In South Carolina's swamp so wide, a hunter stalks where shadows bide. With silver blade and moonlit aim, he sends the thirsty back to flame. And Matthew is an author, writer. He writes a lot about esoteric,
Yeah.
different Norse culture. He's also a musician. So thank you, Matthew.
The strange thing is, I do have a silver blade, absolutely, and you know that is one thing you would definitely arm yourself against, even the vampire and the werewolf with. Silver is a definite thing to have. And by the way, I've been in the swamps of South Carolina looking for lizard man as well. Another
Wow.
interesting cryptid. Yeah.
Someone said, is it dogmen as in loup garou of Louisiana? Are they the same thing? Loup garou?
Now, the loup garou is really the just a sort of the French way of saying the Creole way of saying a werewolf. The French, I think, pronunciation for that is the loup garou, and there's different ways to say it. But then you have the rougarou. The
A
rougarou,
rougarou, I've heard of
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's sort of like dog man, but it's sort of like the wendigo in some ways. It is a
Okay.
spiritual thing that can possess you, um, very much like the wendigo can.
And Renee was wondering if he's ever heard of Roy Stubblefield. He has had werewolf loup garou.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know who that is. Roy
yeah,
Stubblefield?
yeah. And Stubblefield's a very interesting case. Yeah, uh, very much like some that were in Eastern Europe. Once upon a time, there was a Peter Stubb there that thought he was a werewolf or claimed to be, and he actually said that he worked for the church. That the church supposedly, I don't know if you ever heard of the Hounds of God. It's supposedly a secret sect in the Catholic Church made up of werewolves who work for God as assassins or something like that.
Wow. Do you think there's vampires in the Catholic Church, like way up high? Do you think there's like bad people in there? I hear all sorts of weird stories.
There have been rumors over the years that some cardinals and maybe even a pope or two were vampires. It would be interesting to find out and do some more investigation on that, definitely.
I
But
don't want to
yeah,
get too close to that Vatican to find
the,
out. Might go missing.
the Church of Rome hides its secrets very well. It keeps them very close to it. The Vatican knows how to do that, I think, but who knows what may be in the files of the Vatican.
Yeah, down in their basement.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's intense because I've always heard of people talk about the
Well,
Black Pope and the Gray
it goes
Pope
back
and stuff like
to
that.
it's very much like the very famous legend of the Casket Girls in New Orleans. They was actually supposed to be part of the makeup of the Catholic Church at that time. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with the legend of the Casket Girls, but
I'm not. No.
they were taken to a convent in New Orleans. Supposedly, they were shipped over here from France. And at that time, there weren't any women in New Orleans, so they were looking to have men settle down and have families and
Hmm.
all that. It was kind of very much a frontier town at that time. So they imported some of these young ladies and to New Orleans, and supposedly some of them were vampires. And somehow or another on the ship over, some of them vampirized some other women. But anyway, they were supposedly taken by night by the nuns of this nunnery to the convent and put upstairs in the convent. And according to the legend, that the Pope found out about this and supposedly sent silver nails that they would keep these women in the upstairs and keep them away from the men of New Orleans because they were vampires. It's a long and story legend. It's very interesting, but a lot of it is that just legend mostly. I think it's not the real. The
Hmm.
reason they call them the Casket Girls is because they each one had a little trunk like, and the
Oh,
French name
okay.
for the trunk was casquette. Not like a casket you bury somebody in, but a casquette
Right.
is sort of like a hat box type looking thing.
Right.
But that's how they got started. But suppose, and I think they probably snuck them into the convent at night because there were a lot of men around and hadn't had any
Oh,
female relation around for a long
well,
time. That might they snuck them in.
sometimes when people are doing illicit stuff or gang activity, they'll create a phenomena to cover for it and or like a ghost story so you won't go near the area. That happens often.
Yeah, that's true. It's especially if it's a hot air. I tell you what I like to do, and I've done a lot of ghost investigations in my time. I like to call it spiritual research. I don't know if they've done the term ghost hunting to death,
Mhm.
but I would tell people to say, "Oh, this happened here and that happened there in this room." I said, "Don't tell me about it. I'd rather find out myself. Don't predispose my mind to it." Because then you will probably do it. Let me tell you a quick experiment that a mentalist did one time. He was a mentalist called the Great Kreskin. That was his name. and he would go around the country doing all kinds of mentalist type stuff. But he did this experiment one night. He took 10 people out of the audience, and
Mhm.
he said, "No, there's been a lot of UFO sightings here over the last 3 weeks, and we're all going to go out in the parking lot in the back, and we're going to spend an hour watching the sky, and then we're going to come back in and report on what we've seen or experienced." So an hour later, they all come back in, and then, so the mentalist asked them all, said, "Did anybody see any UFOs? See any weird light?" And most every one of them raised their hand. Yes, I saw something. He said, "Well, now I wanted to tell you that I lied. There were no UFOs seen. I did this to show you the power of the mind and the power of getting people to believe what you want them to believe. That may not necessarily be true. So we have to be, as investigators, that's the one thing we need to guard against, not to predispose our minds to these things, but to try to. I like to keep things on the even balance and scale. Uh, I have an old saying: you must first prove what it is not before you
Right.
can prove what it is, and that's the way I always do it.
Now, have you researched vampires across different cultures? Like, does it change? Are there different ideas, like, say, China or Russia or
Mhm.
Africa or something like that? Like, do you have are they similar? Do they have the similar problems, or do they have some totally different phenomena?
Well, they approach it from different areas. I mean, like, in different places, you have the Vortalok, and then you have the Werdalag, you have the Nosferatu. In Greece, it's called the Vorvalica.
Mhm.
Uh, you have different names for these things all over different parts of the world. When I first started investigating the paranormal, I made a list. I call it the main list. And on this list, and almost every culture in the world shared these things. They had a belief in giants, they had a belief in witches, ghosts, shapeshifters, vampires. The list went on and on. And this pops up in almost every culture worldwide. You have to ask
Mhm.
yourself a very important question: why? Could it be that
Mhm.
these people have encountered these things in wherever they may live, whatever thing? And the Japanese and the Chinese look upon ghosts in a much different way than we do in the West. They are
Mhm.
usually their ancestors, or they are usually, but yet they're still kind of scary. Definitely, the way they look at it that way. Some
It
of them
depends
do.
on the ancestor, right?
Yeah, that's the. I was telling somebody the other day. We were talking about dragons, and that's another thing on the list. Um, the Chinese dragon does not have wings.
Right.
Only the European dragon has wings. Why is that?
Right.
Yeah, why do our
Yeah,
dragons fly and
I
theirs
don't
don't?
know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, we've got like a bat dragon or something, and
Yeah.
their dragon's more like a snake.
Hmm. But
That's
now,
really interesting.
the dragon that we know about that breathes fire and all that is actually in the Bible. It's actually talked about in the Bible. Um,
Do
the
they call it a
dragon,
dragon?
I think without a doubt, at one time or another, they say that all, somehow or another, a switch got flipped and all the dragon dinosaurs died out. I don't believe that. I believe that
Right.
mankind at one time or another encountered these things. I think they still
Right.
existed in certain parts of the world. I don't think they all died on the same day. Definitely do not. Um, and I think that's what you're seeing reflected in folklore. You're seeing these encounters that people have had with witches, vampires, and all this stuff. You see that reflection in folklore. It tells you that people have actually interacted with these things, just like dragons. I think they've definitely, Alexander the Great talked about his men encountering dragons in caves in India. Um,
Wow. I
you
never
gotta
heard of
wonder.
that.
Yeah, you gotta wonder about that because, and by the
I
way,
mean,
we call them dinosaurs now, but the word dinosaur was invented in 1849. Guess what they called them before that?
what?
Dragon. Dragons.
Dragons. Okay. My favorite dinosaur was the Stegosaurus, just in case anybody wanted to know.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a thing for the dragon types.
Somebody asked me something funny about that. Somebody asked me something funny about that the other day. The Stegosaurus says, how did they have sex? I said, well, very carefully.
That's
And
funny.
all those scales and all that thing.
So I don't want to keep you too much longer. It's getting a little late, but I want to tie it up with asking you if you've ever had a experience so terrifying that it left you like it just left you a different person, like something so horrifying and so traumatic of an experience in all of your years and decades of doing this field.
Well, I have had several instances over the years, and I've been in some very, I guess people would call very spooky places. Matter of fact, going back to Charleston, I investigated the area where they hung the pirates, and it was down on the waterfront, the batteries they call it there, and they would actually would leave them hanging there for a while, sort of as a sign to the other would be pirates out there, don't come here. This is what's going to happen to you. And so they would leave them hanging there. When they, for such amount of time, they would take their bodies down and throw them in the swamp for the alligators. And I told somebody, if you want ghosts, that is a definite way to get ghosts. Okay, desecration of bodies, they don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's definitely one way that would go. But I had some very freaky experiences down there, and you're in some very dark, evil, spooky looking place like that. Sometimes you say, "What am I doing here?" What am I really doing
Right.
here?
What did I get myself into?
But I had a case, and I'll relate this to you since it relates to vampires. I had a case that was very disturbing to me. I had a young girl come to me. It's been about maybe 10 years ago. She come to me. She was very distraught, and she met me at a nearby restaurant, and she had seen me on television or something, and she wanted and contacted me, and she said, I got a very bad problem. My mother, who recently passed away, was a very mean, narcissistic, evil, malignant person. She never got along with anybody. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about anybody but herself. And said that her mother came to her. Her and her mother never got along. So the mother came to her a few months back and said, "I'm dying of cancer, and I've got only a few days, and I want you to stay with you till I go." And she said, "Well, sure, mother, you can do that. Absolutely, I'll take care of you." And her mother, she said it didn't change her mother. She was even more malevolent than before, and she just seemed to hate everything now. And said that her mother made one request to her. Said, "When I die, I want to be buried in a certain dress she had. It was a white satin like dress, almost kind of like a wedding dress, but it wasn't a wedding dress, but something very similar to that. And it was her favorite dress. She said, I want to be buried in this." Okay. And the daughter said, "Sure, I will do that for you, mother." So she said, my mother passed away about 2 weeks ago, and said that I had her buried in that dress. And ever since then, Dr. Carroll, my mother has been coming back to me in dreams at night. It said it's getting to the point where I don't want to go to sleep anymore. I don't want to go to sleep at night because I'm afraid I will dream about her. And she said she's not acting like my mother in these dreams. Like my mother was, she was like touching me and putting her head on my shoulder and doing stuff. She said it just made me just very uncomfortable, and said I wake up every morning, I'm just drained. I'm just completely drained. It's hard for me to get up and start making coffee and all that stuff. She said, "What's going on with me?" And I said, "And I just get this bad feeling after these dreams." And she said, and then the other night I found something on the floor in my room when I got up the other morning, and it looks like a piece. And she gave it to me, a piece off of white satin off of that dress I buried her in my room. And I said, "Well, this is not good. Definitely not good." And I said, "Let me do something for you. Let me try to help you, okay?" And I've always tried to do that. If people come to me with their problems, I definitely want to be a help for them if I can. And so I said, "Where's your mother buried at?" She told me where the cemetery was, and her mother was buried in a mausoleum. So I said, "I'll tell you what I will do for you." I said, "For the next 7 nights, I will stake out, no pun intended, I will stake out this cemetery, and watch for your mother and see if she's coming back. Okay. And she said, well, what if she is? I said, well, if she is, we'll have to, cross that bridge when we get to it. So for 7 long dark nights, I stayed in that cemetery, and believe me, it was a something like out of a horror movie. Okay. and and it would get foggy at nights, and on top of all that. And one night,
Right.
middle of this week, I see something white moving out among the tombstones. And immediately, of course, I get the flashlight, I go out there, and I find out it's a big white dog just walking around out there in the cemetery of all things. Now, I'm a sort of an animal person. Animals usually like me. They come up to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the dog was acting very strange. It would just sit there looking at me, what are you doing here, kind of thing. It wouldn't come to me. I tried to call. Finally, he walked off. Well, 7 long nights I watched that place. So I went back and told her that I never saw anything. She said, "Well, she's still coming, and my dreams are getting worse and worse. And I think I'm going crazy. And I said, "Well, there's one more thing I will do for you, if you will give me permission." She said, "Whatever it is, you do it. So don't tell me, just do it." I said, "Okay." So I go back to the mausoleum, and I have some blessed chalk, and I mark a cross on her grave, and I speak to her, and I said, I call her by name, like her name was Harriet. I said, "Harriet, there's no more place for you here. It's time for you to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Your daughter doesn't need you here. You don't need to stay here anymore. There's no room for you. You need to go on to where you need to go. There's nothing left for you here." Okay, I do all this. So I marked the blessed chalk cross thing on there, and the next day I get a call from this girl. She said, "What did you do last night?" I said, "Well, I did what I had to do, and I didn't want to I don't like to bother my clients too much and get them nervous. I don't. I'm trying to scare them or freak them out." I said, "Well, I did what I had to
Mm-hmm.
do." So I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, I didn't dream any. I slept up very well last night. No dreams, nothing. I feel 100% better this morning." And a week later, she called me back with another report and said, "No more dreams. That's it." I said, "Well, good. We accomplished what we needed to do." And I think, without a doubt, she won't have any more problems. But I still have that little piece of cloth as a reminder of what that
Wow.
sometimes things that you bury may come back. Definitely.
Yeah. It's it's a common report. Like I said, you hear it all the time in folklore. Dead relatives visiting from beyond the grave. I've actually had it as an experience, although it wasn't quite as horrific. One more question, and it just popped in my head, and I meant to ask: is there a tie between UFOs and vampires? Have you ever had any weird case where a UFO vampire combo was involved, or someone intimated that there was a connection?
I think there may be interdimensional vampires. Without a doubt, there
Okay.
may be some type of a thing like that. And I think UFOs are definitely spiritually related things sometimes. I think and this goes back biblically as well. I think there is a definite supernatural connection with some of this stuff. There's been too many reports over the years of people encountering the smell of sulfur, which is very demonic. Actually mentioning the name of Jesus in encounters would run off some of these so-called aliens. A lot of this stuff is very demonic, and it gets my attention as a demonologist. I say, "Oh, there's definitely some smoke here, and there's definitely fire as well with the UFO thing." I think we got to remember something very important, Melissa, about this that I have found out the hard way over the years in this field, and that is that everything in this world may not be what it appears to be. Most of the time, it's not.
Right. Like it'll present, like you get a lot of demons presenting as children ghosts, and then it turns out that they're not so nice.
Yeah, I've
Trickier.
actually seen demons appear as children. Definitely. And if there are such a thing as interdimensional vampires, that would explain a lot of things too. I think the interdimensional we're talking about is really the spiritual aspects of this universe. They're really the
Mhm.
spiritual part there. Kind of like that movie Constantine. You might remember that. When he went
Mhm.
to hell, hell was just like one step over from where we're at. It's still our world, but it was hell. And I believe that there
Right.
are definitely dimensional aspects to our reality like that. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's interesting because I was talking and I don't have the image, but Aleister Crowley, I was talking about him on that one with the CIA and all that stuff, and he had done all this, like, ritual stuff and calling. Basically, he was, channeling some kind of being, and he called it lamb, and he drew a picture of it, and it kinda, not exactly, but it kinda looked like an alien, like a gray alien. It was kinda creepy. I was like, "Ooh, what are we dealing with here?" That's why I asked. I was like, "What are we really dealing with?" And some people, like John Connor in the audience, referenced the movie Planet of the Vampires, that there's, like, a planet out there of vampire people. Like, it's interesting because we
He
never know
was
exactly what we're dealing with.
Aleister Crowley was definitely connected to inspiration for the Vril Society, which was connected to
Mhm,
the Nazis, by the way, very big.
mhm,
And the Vril Society, the ladies of the Vril Society, were channeling an alien consciousness from out there somewhere.
wow.
But let me say this, and to everybody listening tonight, when you contact the other side, whoever or whatever they say they may be, may not be who they really are.
That's right. That's
You know,
why you
I've had
never
people.
play.
I've had people over the years say, "Oh, my spirit guide tells me this. My spirit guide." Who do you know exactly what your spirit guide really is? That's the demonic. That's the way it operates. And believe me, they've got a lot of people in this world claiming to be other things than they
Mhm.
are. They even fool people into believing there's dead relatives sometimes. That's just the way they operate. And if they could definitely get you to believe they're aliens or whatever the case may be, they will do that. No doubt about it.
All right. Well, do you have any future investigations or books or any projects that you're going to be working on?
Well, I'm working on a book right now called Paracryptidology, the hunting monsters and things of nightmare. And I've got one chapter in there that you would like. It's called Vampires I Have Known. But definitely working on that, hoping to have it out by the end of the year. But I've got a little thing on the back cover I wrote the other day, and I think you'll like this. Because when I was a little kid, I was a monster kid. I love monster movies. Always have. And I used to have my teachers get on to me when I was like in the third grade. You're staying up all night watching monster movies. And so on the back of the books is what it says: when you are a little child, you believe that monsters are real. Then you grow up to find out they really are.
They really are.
They really
That's a
are.
good way to end the show. Where can people find you on the internet, Dennis? You have a YouTube channel called The Midnight, or is it called The Midnight Hunter? What's your YouTube channel called?
It's called Hunting Shadows YouTube podcast
Hunting
channel.
Shadows.
Yeah, and also I've written several books that are available on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. Just look up the author Dennis W. Carroll. And if you need me for any kind of consultation service, you got problems or you just want to tell a story or whatever, or send me a poem or whatever you want to do, you can contact me at denniswcarroll.com. That's my website, denniswcarroll.com. I had to put the W in there. There's another Dennis Carroll, but he's a football player and I don't play football. But anyway,
So-
that's where you can reach me there with anything like that. And also, my podcasts are Monday nights. I have a show called all of them are at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, and the first podcast on Monday night is called The Road Less Traveled. Uh, I also have a co-host of that, Gerald Fountain. On Wednesday night, I do Hunting the Shadows. That's why the reason I call it Hunting the Shadows. We're trying to pull the secrets and the truth out into the light from out of the shadows. We hunt the shadows that way. And I have a Patreon and a membership for the Shadow Wolves out there. They want to join up. And also on Friday night, I have Paranormal Point of View. It's where we review movies, books, magazines, stuff like that related to paranormal and supernatural subjects.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to pop you out here and close off the show. You don't have to hang around if you don't want to. I'm going to close it off and let people know what's going on next week. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and hopefully you'll come back.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it. I definitely look forward to getting together again with you.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys, that was awesome. If you guys have any questions or anything, it's denniswcarroll.com. Remember, subscribe to this channel, thumbs up, and I think if we get another person subscribing on Substack, we get to stream to Substack. Apparently, there's a magic number. So, melissadawnharris.substack.com. Of course, my website is melissadawnharris.com. You can find all the links there that you can find. There's a lot of good stuff on Substack, and I'll be adding to it in the future. Next week, I have Bigfoot Michigan Rob coming on Thursday. So, we're going to talk about some spooky stuff. Tuesday, I might do some light Wicca stuff. I might profile someone really positive, because I know we talk about witchcraft. I know we talk a lot about this stuff and the paranormal and demons, but I want to talk about positive people who are about healing and nature and doing the right thing. And I've got a couple of people showcased up and that I'd like to talk to or talk about on Tuesday show, because Tuesday is more of the occult and the conspiracy theory, vampires in the simulation it's called, and Thursdays is for shows like this, which is actual vampire folklore. So I appreciate you guys coming aboard. See if there's any last minute. Very interesting, great show. Thank you guys. We had a lot in the room, so I thank you guys. Please come around, and if you do want to contact me about being a guest or being on your show, of course, it is melissadharris77@gmail.com. All right, guys, I'm going to close off, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much.
Broadcasting from the crypt. Welcome to Velvet Bite Radio.
You've entered Velvet Bite Radio, my friends, where the undead speak and the forgotten bite back. I'm your host, Melissa Dawn Harris.